Real quick, I want to tell you about a free webinar I'm hosting on April 25th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time called Repurposing Content for Your Podcast. Depending on the guru of the day, you need a podcast, you need to be on TikTok, you need to be posting on LinkedIn, and don't forget your own blog and newsletter. And this can lead to burnout fast. But I'm here to tell you a better way. By repurposing content, there's a reason I'm able to publish 3 podcast episodes per week, 3 newsletters, and post on LinkedIn almost daily. So in this free 60-minute webinar, you will learn how to capture content ideas as easily as possible, how to build your own content flywheel from content you've already created, how to keep track of everything, and how to create a two-way street where you're repurposing for and from your podcast. Sign up for free today at profitablepodcaster.fm/repurpose. If you are struggling to create content, you need this webinar. Again, that URL is profitablepodcaster.fm/repurpose. I want you to imagine that you just bought a car. You bought a car because a lot of people have been telling you that you should have a car. And that generally it's probably good to have a car and it's fun to have a car. So you buy this car and you get behind the wheel and you kind of vaguely know where you want to go, but you don't know how to get there. You don't really know if a car is the best way to get there, but you just decide to start driving. That eventually you'll get to where you need to go. That sounds like a massive waste of time and money, especially with the way gas prices are today. But this is what a lot of podcasters do. They know they want to start a podcast. They think they should start a podcast, and that maybe they can make some money somehow with podcasting. But the truth is, you buy a car when you know a car is the best thing to get you from A to B. And you know what A is, and you know what B is, and you have directions for how to get from A to B. Now, if you're listening to this and you already have a podcast, you're maybe wondering, should I go return my car? Should I stop my podcast? I don't think so, but I do think you have A, you want to get to B, and you need that map. When it comes to podcasting, if we assume B is making money, your mission statement is the map. So today, we are going to talk about why you need a mission statement for your podcast and the questions you need to answer to make that podcast profitable. Welcome to Make Money Podcasting, the podcast that teaches you monetizing your show is no longer just about getting sponsors. On this show, you'll learn tried and true methods to increase your revenue and turn your podcast from a money pit into a money maker. Hi, I'm your host, Joe Casabona, and I've been able to make 6 figures with my podcast. I'll share everything I know with you here on Make Money Podcasting, presented by Nexus and Podcast Liftoff. Okay, so let's talk about your mission statement. And I'm not saying your mission statement is the title or maybe what vaguely your show is about. I'm saying your mission statement is the thing that your podcast and every single episode sets out to do, to perform. Every episode wants to accomplish this goal. So right up front, I'm going to give you my framework for coming up with a good mission statement. Get a pen and paper ready, because here it comes. My podcast helps blank solve blank by blank. And you fill in the blanks with audience, problem, and goal of every episode. So my podcast helps audience solve problem by performing the goal of every episode. If we're talking about Make Money Podcasting, My podcast helps podcasters of any size solve the problem of losing money with their podcast by giving them tried and true methods for generating income with their show. If we look at my main podcast, How I Built It, my podcast helps creators solve the problem of being consistent and building their business from their creative work by offering free coaching sessions with successful creators. That is the goal. We're talking about who the show is helping, what problem your show is solving, and then a stated goal for every episode. And this is really important because as more people start to podcast, you can't just have founder stories or interview shows. I was listening to a podcast called On Your Terms by Sarah Vanderweyden. I hope I'm saying, I want to say I'm saying that right. We hung out at Craft and Commerce. But she has some really great insight from her podcast episode on kind of what she learned starting a podcast. And one of her big takeaways was she didn't want to just do interviews with the same people who keep doing interviews. I think that's a really important thing to consider when you are either creating or readjusting your show. Because again, you don't have to, if you have a podcast, you don't have to burn it all down. Again, my show, How I Built It, I've pivoted a couple of times throughout its 6 years, basically from WordPress developers to WordPress business owners to creators. So you don't have to burn it all down, but you do need to seek some clarity. This is why your mission statement is so important, because you define that, and then that is the roadmap for how to get from I have a podcast to I have a podcast that makes money. It'll help you determine your format and your topics and who you're talking to. And if you are doing interviews, it'll help you kind of weed out the people who maybe just want to go on your show because you have an audience or because they're trying to fill some quota. So an example for me, right, is again, How I Built It, my podcast, How I Built It, offers free coaching sessions for creators. So a recent episode is with Dickie Bush. That quote unquote coaching session was how to become a consistent writer. That was the coaching session essentially. And I know that that's the goal of every episode. So when someone pitches me and they just want to tell their story about how they started their business, I know that that is an immediate rejection because we're not getting actionable advice. We're not getting a coaching session. We are getting a probably well-rehearsed story about how this person started a company and overcame adversity and worked really hard. And now they have this thing that they want to tell you about. I'm not interested in that. My audience is not interested in that. And that's not solving the problem that my podcast sets out to solve. So with your podcast, I want you to do this exercise. I think it's really important. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about why it is so important. But you need to answer these questions. Who are my listeners? And this is maybe like an ideal customer avatar thing, but I want you to think about who you're talking to when you're creating these episodes. Again, if we look at On Your Terms by Sam, her audience is made up of creators who are selling something online, who need legal advice. And this fits in really well with all of Sam's episodes and her call to action, which is these contract templates that she sells. So, who are my listeners? That's the first question. The second question is, what problem do my listeners have? Because again, I think your podcast today, if you're starting in 2022, your podcast needs to be purpose-driven. It can't just be two dudes on a microphone talking anymore. That's like a very tired format. The interview format works if you have it within the context of this, where your conversations are geared towards helping somebody. But just two people talking, I can listen to Joe Rogan for that. I can listen to My First Million for that. I can listen to How I Built This. I can listen to those podcasts are a dime a dozen. I can listen to any sports podcast if I want to hear two dudes talking about random stuff. What I want is a podcast that helps me solve a problem. So, who are my listeners? What problem are they trying to solve? And then the third question, how do I solve that problem? Break down your solution into bite-sized chunks or steps. And now that's what your first 10 or 20 episodes are about. So again, I'll say this and then we'll take our quick sponsor break. But I'll say this. If you followed this podcast when it first launched in early 2022, you'll notice that I took a long break between like February and July. And that's because my mission wasn't as clearly defined as I thought it was. I thought my mission was just help people make any kind of money. And I wanted to lay all of the groundwork. But now my mission is clearer. They want actionable advice to start making money today. So my first episode when I came back from this short hiatus was my SMASH framework. 5 tried and true ways to make money with your podcast. Now I'm telling you this because after the break, you're going to find out why your mission statement is crucial in getting sponsors or selling products. But those are the 3 questions I want you to think about. Who are my listeners? What problem are my listeners trying to solve? And how do I solve that problem? Because how do I solve that problem? That's going to create your episodes. And then you're going to have a goal for each of those episodes. Filling out the mission statement, my podcast helps this audience solve this problem by doing this in every episode. So there is the mission statement framework. Let's take a break from our sponsor and hear from our sponsor. And then we'll get into why this is so important. This and every episode of Make Money Podcasting is brought to you by Store Builder from Nexus. As a podcaster, you might be wondering what's the best way for me to implement some of the things that we talk about on this show. How can I easily make money with my own website? And when it comes to setting up an e-commerce site, you kind of have the choice between an easy but limited platform or a limitless platform that you need to manage yourself, taking precious time away from your podcast. Until now, Store Builder is e-commerce made easy for everybody. It saves you time and delivers a storefront that lets you get to business. As someone who has set up multiple e-commerce sites, I can tell you that Store Builder has been a much easier experience than anything else I've tried. Answer a few questions, add your content, and sell. Store Builder was created and is supported by the e-commerce experts at Nexus. I host all of my important sites, including the membership for my own podcast and this podcast at Nexus. Get the speed, security, and support you need when you need it. Whether you're selling podcast merch, offering a supplementary course, or you have a membership or subscription. Are you ready to monetize your podcast the way you want to? Head on over to makemoneypod.com/storebuilder, all one word, to try it for free for 30 days. That's makemoneypod.com/storebuilder. Thanks so much to StoreBuilder and Nexus for sponsoring this and every episode of Make Money Podcasting. All right, so now that you're thinking about your mission statement, let me tell you why this is so important. Because sponsors and brands, they know who their target audience is. They know what problem they help their target audience solve. So when you have that perfect alignment, they're going to want to get in front of your audience. And it doesn't matter if you have 100 downloads. I mean, it matters a little bit, but it doesn't matter if you don't have thousands of downloads. Because if you're so closely aligned with this audience, then you're creating content on behalf of the sponsor. And you're vouching, you're using your trust to tell your audience, hey, you know how I help you solve this problem? Today's sponsor also helps you solve this problem. The sponsor you just heard from helps you solve the problem of making money with your podcast. Maybe they don't help you get sponsors, but they help with a crucial part of the Smash framework, which is memberships. Or e-commerce, where you can sell a digital product or service. So when I look for sponsors, I want to make sure we're aligned, but sponsors and brands also want that too. And your mission statement helps, because now when you pitch sponsors, you can say, hey, I know that your product helps podcasters make money. My podcast also does that. If you want to get in front of an audience that is loyal and trusts me and is interested in your solution, I have an offer for you. But it's not just sponsorships. It's your services or products too, right? So if you sell a product or maybe a course, then your product or your course should do the same thing, right? It should be for a target audience to solve a specific problem. Recently on my main show, How I Built It, I interviewed Sam Munoz, and she successfully monetizes her podcast by using it as the top of funnel to sell her mentorship program. And her mission for her podcast is so tightly aligned with her mentorship program that the people who are listening to her podcast need more. So when I talked to her, I was like, what, you get people on your mailing list, then you put them in a sales sequence? And she said, no. When the doors are open, the call to action is just go sign up for my mentorship program. And this isn't a $20 mentorship program. It's a high ticket item thing that her audience is primed to buy because her mission is clear. She knows who she helps. She knows the problem she's solving, and her episodes successfully solve that problem. So I hope what you'll take away from this episode is you need to define or redefine your mission statement. Maybe you had one, but it wasn't quite what you thought it was. This is the key to building a profitable podcast, because it's going to help you determine your content, the format of your content, and how you make money, right? Because maybe an affiliate program is not the best thing based on your mission. Maybe selling a product isn't the best thing based on your mission. Maybe a sponsorship is, or vice versa. Maybe you don't want to have sponsorship because you know you're going to be selling that product. So there you have it. That's it for today's episode. Thanks so much for listening to Make Money Podcasting, presented by Nexus and Podcast Liftoff. For all of the show notes and to subscribe, you can head over to makemoneypod.com/006. Thanks so much to our sponsor, Nexus. And until next time, I'm Joe Casabona, and I can't wait to see what you make.